Yeah, today's volunteer day. I need to get a couple hours of in the county.
Yes. Infinity mirror, pretty wild.
You don't see it anymore, do you?
No.
Okay. Let's check the YouTube.
Well, the movie that we rented for 2 years ago.
Did you ask me that or did it?
What did it ask you?
It said, are you talking? Your mic is off.
Oh, it'll do that.
Okay. So you're gonna watch and do I have to do I was like, I thought it was your phone. No, I don't watch it. Turn my phone off. I would be trying to get here.
There you go. Good, how are you? We're at a meeting regarding the lowest of the Yeah. You're not if you're a shipper, together. Yeah. Today is the last day. I had to stop and take advantage of this. When you go to the, I'm just not that I had to wear a hat. If you go to the, next day, yeah, I was kind of looking forward to that.
And you can still hear me okay? You can still hear me?
Well, I don't have my earphones.
Yeah. Test it, 1, 2. Okay.
I'll give you a better headlight. I'm so glad to see you.
All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started. For those of you that don't know, I'm Roberto Gaitan. I'm the president of the Rio Grande Valley chapter of the Native Plant Society of Texas. This is our, I lost track, 5th month anniversary. So far so good. I sent out this first draft of a newsletter that I wanted to sort of get started with. If anybody wants to help out with it, that'd be great. But I'm sending this out to chapter members. But it has a little bit of information on there that I'm trying to share. We're at 39 official chapter members so far, which is not too bad given that we are so new. We are starting the native landscaping certification classes this fall. So starting in August, we're going to have 4 classes. Level 1, we'll have 1 in Mission, 1 in Weslaco, and 2 at the Native Plant Center on the island. We're hoping, I'm trying to remember, Eva, you can help me. We were thinking of what, 20 students per class? I think. So we'll start slow. I'm sorry? Yeah, so we're going to cap it at about 20 people per class. Get through this first time that we're offering this, and then later on next year, we'll offer more of the different levels. There are 4 levels. Level 1 and 3 gives you the certification as maintenance, certified for maintenance of native landscapes. All 4 levels gives you a certification of landscaping with natives. So level 1 is an introduction, level 3 is maintenance, level 2 is design of your native landscape, and then level 4 is stewardship. And that's how the classes will break out. There are 2 symposiums with the Native Plant Society. The fall symposium is coming up in August. It'll be in the San Marcos area. If you're interested, I'm sorry, New Braunfels, San Marcos, to me it's all one big blob. But it is really interesting to be around like-minded people. They highlight the different native habitats wherever the symposiums are. And my hope is that maybe in 2026, we can offer to have it here. We're the first chapter in the Rio Grande Valley. Many people that I talk to at the symposium don't know we exist. San Antonio is as far south as Texas goes, and they don't have a clue. Even our current president of the society came down here, and that was his first time that he ever stepped into the valley, and he just had no clue. There are folks that are doing the Bring Back the Monarch to Texas. They came and visited Seth out at Oleander Acres, and that all the plants that were there were new to them as well. So we're submitting these grant applications to the society based out of Texarkana, and we're giving them a native plant list, and they're saying, what are these? And so Seth is having to go back, and he gave them the plants of Deep South Texas just to educate them that this is what exists here. And we'll have occasional disagreements with some of the folks in the society that say, well, according to this database, that plant doesn't exist in the valley. I'm like, come out here, come take a look, it's here. So there's a lot of these different things that we'll work through as they get to know us a lot better. But being out there with these folks to let them know that we exist is certainly a plus. Just go out there. So that's the Fall Symposium 2024. For chapter members, you can participate in the media contest. This is photo, video, or we don't quite have the newsletter ready yet. But if you have that outstanding photo, it'd be great to have photos of our ecoregion to submit, and they get recognized at the symposium. And that's open for the chapter members. On our website, the society website, you will find at the very beginning a calendar of different events that are going on across the state, both in person and virtual. And every so often you'll see something that's really interesting, like how to get rid of St. Augustine grass from your lawn, done by a chapter in Austin, for example. But those are really useful, really beneficial, because sometimes I have that patch of St. Augustine, what can I do? Listen to some of the other society members that have actually tackled that already. And we get to learn a little bit about what they're doing. So take a look at that. We do also post some of the different things that are happening with different organizations like Fort Worth Save Water organization has a huge push in Tarrant County to convince the community to save water. And some of their webinars are really, really good. Some of those I'm hoping that we can adapt and bring to down here, because we have as much of a water problem as they do. And so I'm also attending these, trying to grasp these little topics and these lessons learned from them that we can implement down here. The Native Plant Center, we'll talk about this a little bit more after the presentation. We are a few days away from learning whether we will have funding from the county to do a lot of the things that we want to do. So hopefully by, I don't want to jinx it, by Tuesday night, we'll know one way or the other. Yeah, fingers crossed. So Tuesday night. For many that have been to the visitor center, those shelves that were there for that indoor aquarium and indoor plant display is gone. So it has been removed, which is going to give us a nice, bigger open space for us to have this meeting hopefully next month. So next month's meeting, we invited Mike Heap to do a presentation, and he talked about all these different topics, and we're like, you know what, whatever you do, we know we're going to like it. So hopefully we'll have Mike Heap, I think it's August 13th, the second Saturday of the month, and we'll have him out at the plant center. So we are going through the hassle of getting electricity plugged in. The latest hurdle on an email I got yesterday was they want me to contact the emergency management system to verify the address of the place. Because it has 3 addresses. 2 of them send you out to the shores, which is past the center, out to those brand new white condos. And they end up calling me saying, I'm lost, I can't find you. And we're talking about AEP, Laguna Mata Water District, which has a place right behind us, and yet they still couldn't find us. So there's all these, the fire marshal couldn't find us with that address that the emergency management system said was ours. And yet I give them the old address, 6809 Project Boulevard, and they find us without a problem. So it's like I'm helping them figure out why their systems are not talking to each other. And it's like, geez. But that's a month now that we're trying to figure out how to just get a permit to get an electrician that can request a meter. So it's a challenge. If we get electricity set up, the county's going to come in and replace the outside AC unit. So we'll actually have air conditioning. So hopefully we'll get there. The last person I'm talking, I can't remember the inspector that came out yesterday. Or was it day before yesterday? And so I have a letter from them saying this is your address that sends you out to the shores or Adolfo Tomei Park, not Andy Bowie Park. And yet they wanted me to call them to say, is this my real address? Because it's sending everybody else down the street. And so it's like, yeah, my next thing on Monday is to call the office and one more time say, what is my address? And if this is the address you want me to use, the postman's not going to find me. Fire department's going to go down the street, even though my place is on fire. So we'll work on that. And after our meeting, we'll talk a little bit more about the design that we're going to put in place. If you guys have not met Ethel Cantu is a master gardener, master naturalist. She had this idea 5, 6 years ago. We now actually have a chance to put it into place. So that is going to be our big challenge coming up. Also, if you follow the Port Isabel South Padre Press, which is a weekly newspaper, or the monthly parade, check out our articles. If you are a member and would like to submit one, send it to me. I'm happy to put it out there. What I'm trying to do is make sure that we have a constant article that we're publishing, that we're offering them to publish to keep this sort of article going. The column is called Native Plant News. I couldn't come up with anything more creative, but it's out there. It's free. If you go online, you can find it, read along, and go out there and add your thoughts. And most of mine, you don't have to be an expert of that plant, but simply appreciate something unique about it and tell your story about it. Why is that plant so unique or special to you? So check it out. There's some articles out there that have already been published. But again, I welcome anybody else to submit something so that we can keep this article as part of our chapter alive. All right, so let me close that. There it is. All right, so we're going to go to today's presentation. And for those of you that don't know Devin Johnston is one half of the R9 Hive and Honey. if you want a nice way to remove that colony of bees that's invading your home, terrorizing your neighborhood, they're the ones that will do it. Uh, what's a good way? Nicely.
We do humane live bee removal.
Yes, so they will actually relocate it to their property, which I have to assume you don't want to get near because they probably have hundreds of hives.
Well, it depends on what I'm doing.
Yeah,
This last
But-
weekend, you didn't want.
but she's been out of our house when we had an invasion. Within 2 weeks or so, we had something like 10,000, 20,000 bees move in, and that was new. That was a new hive, and what she removed, the honeycombs looked like plastic manufactured in some high-tech company because it was just so clean and so precise. Those little hexagons were just simply perfect. And these little guys did that all in 2 weeks. Luckily, we noticed them that you could get them out early, but that's still only half of one of her hive boxes. And then we called her back a few days later because we had other visitors coming in. And when they came out a few days later, for some reason they didn't like our house, they moved away. So thankfully we didn't have a second episode. But what they do is fantastic. She has this knowledge about honeybees, which, as most of us know, are not native, but her passion is the non-native bees as well. And that's just her side hobby. I'm sorry, what did I say?
You said not.
Her native bees are her hobby and her fascination, and hopefully in a year or two, to write a book about it. That's what she said. So. All right, so I'll pass it on to Devin. Thank you, Devin.
All right. Hello, everybody. Today I'm going to talk about pollination syndromes. And I want to couch this with the fact that I am more of an insect person, and as you either know or will know soon, there are more pollinators out there than just your bees and butterflies. So while I'm going to talk about everybody, just remember I'm a bug person. Birds are cool, but not my subject of expertise. So with that little caveat, let's go ahead and get started. I want to talk about myself just a little bit. I am, as Robert said, part of R9 Hive and Honey. It's a family-owned business. I run it with my mom, and we've been doing live bee removal since 2019. I didn't fall down the native bee rabbit hole until I was just photographing bees on a flower, and I saw a native bee land, and I'm like, well, I don't want to photograph you. I wanted to photograph the honeybee to share with my beekeepers, and so I ended up photographing that native bee, and I'm like, actually, they're cuter. So I'm just going to continue with these guys. I recently became a Texas Master Naturalist as of this year. I've also been a Texas Master Beekeeper, only apprentice rank, because there are ranks to that one and lots of exams. So it's much harder to become a Texas Master Beekeeper. I'm an apprentice. I'm sorry, in advanced right now. And then, of course, I'm part of the Native Plant Society of Texas, general, nerd, goofball, weirdo. I dabble in many things. So I want to put this QR code up here because if you are not a member of the Native Plant Society, please join us. We love doing, interesting things, outdoorsy things, and not only will you get all the email updates about the presentations that we're doing, but also about any other learning opportunities or volunteer opportunities. And I know a lot of you guys are either nature people or naturalists, so we would love to have you join our little group too, because you can't have too many groups. All right, so here is a brief overview of what we're going to be covering today. So we're going to cover a little bit, and I mean just a little bit, of the evolution of flowers, the function of flowers, why do plants even have them, the purpose of pollinators, the pollination syndromes, the type of pollinators. We're going to take a little virtual field trip, and we're going to touch on how do we garden for pollinators, what makes a great pollinator garden. So plants appeared on land about 475 million years ago. Water plants, much older than that. Plants are a very, very ancient lineage of organisms, but the first flowering land plants didn't appear until roughly, once again, these are all debatable, depending on what scientists you talk to, but 130 million years ago. And the first flowers, we don't have fossil records of the very first flowers because fossil records are, you know, hard to find. There's a lot of different, you know, situations where fossils can't be made. But the ones that we do have, and I have a couple examples of, ooh, no, I don't know how to use this thing. Over here, anyways, you look at the picture. I'm sure you guys are capable of looking over. Um, so the very first flowers, so far as we are aware, are going to be pretty unassuming, not very pretty potentially, but um, as far as we know, they were kind of weird shaped, probably more greens and yellows than our fantastic pinks and purples that we might be accustomed to today. And the whole function of a flower is just to aid in the reproduction of these plants. One plant figured it out, and that idea spread like wildfire to all the other plants that, hey, you know, maybe we get something else to do the work because we want to be a little bit lazier in our pollen production. And so now it was so wildly successful that 90% of all plants use flowers for reproduction. All right. And so here is a couple of terms that I will use, and then an image of a very, very, very simplified flower. So you have the pollen, that's the male gametes, the ovule, that's the female. The perfect flowers have both type. Imperfect flowers are either male or female. And then one important thing is about pollination and the role of pollinators is some flowers can self-pollinate, which is great, but not all flowers. And you'll see pollinators visit both self-pollinating flowers and non-self-pollinating flowers. And it's really interesting to think about, well, why can these guys do the self-pollination but not others? And yet they both still often equally attract similar or the same pollinators. So, pollination syndrome. The expression of traits evolved by plants to modify flowers in response to living and non-living factors. And if you've ever gone outside, you'll have noticed that flowers vary wildly from big, showy flowers that you can spot from the highway as you're driving away to those big fields of commercial sunflowers that everybody's stopping and taking photos of, to plants who you don't even know are flowering until you've walked by them and you're like, why is this tree buzzing? And that's because flowers have different functions. Flowers have different functions and will attract different pollinators. So what suits a sunflower and its color and shape might not suit another flower. I mean, another plant, because we have wind pollination, water pollination, and animal pollination. So if you're a wind pollinated plant, let's say like corn, you're probably going to be growing in a dense area full of other corn where the wind can just take your many plentiful pollen and just generally scatter it around the earth. And you're probably going to get your plant pollinated, or you're probably going to get pollinated. But with animal pollination, yes, it takes a lot more energy to produce the flower, to produce the nectar, to bribe these pollinators. But you don't have to produce as much pollen, and thus you have a bit of a trade-off in terms of how much energy these plants are going to be using. So types of pollinators. Your abiotic are really simple, really easy, wind and water. That's pretty much the majority of what you need to know about abiotic or non-living pollination factors. But once you get over to biotic, you start getting a list that makes your text very small on PowerPoints. So you have your insects, you have bees, butterflies, moths, beetles, flies, and flies you can divide up into two categories themselves, carrion flies or flower or nectaring flies. You have birds, you have hummingbirds, orioles, mockingbirds, warblers. I had a whole list of them. They didn't fit. Mammals, you have bats, possums, squirrels, there's lemurs, other little creatures. A lot of these ones, so far as I'm aware, we don't have nectaring small mammals as much as some other places, Australia, New Zealand, kind of think in the more tropical fancy places like that, will have a lot more mammal pollinators. But of course, we do have bats. We'll talk about bats. So I just had Robert pass out essentially this graph I'm not going to pause too long on this graph because you have it in person, but we're going to see different trends. So for example, for bees and butterflies, you'll see those are some of the only creatures that like having nectar guides. And a nectar guide is essentially a arrow pointing to where the nectaries are in a way that the insect has to interact with the pollen. And these are guides that are UV, and we can't see them unless you shine a UV flashlight or you use an infrared camera, something that can see beyond the human visible light spectrum. And then you'll notice the flower shapes. So any creature that is kind of bumbly like a bee or a beetle, they're going to want a flower shape that can support this insect sitting on it. But if you're a hovering insect or an insect that has large wings and you're slender, more graceful butterfly, a moth, you're going to have more tubed flowers because they can float in place really nice. They have a very long proboscis, that's their tongue. It's a straw, so they can sit there and be graceful and beautiful. Versus a beetle, have you seen them fly? It's not very good. And a lot of people also believe bees can fly very well. Sure, but have you, if you watch them, they hit everything. They will run into flowers, they will run into people. So some of the less nimble insects require a landing pad so they just don't hit it and fall immediately off, because I've seen that a lot, even on the big flowers. And for example, you'll see flies all the way at the end for scent, so that beautiful floral scent. Well, carrion flies, they don't care about flowers, they want to eat dead stuff. So if they want to eat dead stuff, a beautiful wasache tree blooming in February isn't going to get their attention. It's not for me. So those are going to be the flowers that you find that are not very flower looking. They're ugly, they're brown, they're spotted, they look like something that's rotting, and then they stink. That's probably pollinated by a carrion fly. And typically they don't even have nectar because the fly doesn't want the nectar. The fly wants some dead meat. So they trap them inside their flowers and they have to go through like a little maze. So if you think about the behavior of a fly versus a bee, from that alone, that can tell you a little bit about what you would expect the flower to function like. And then the same with the pollen. So, for example, bees and butterflies, they're there on the flower having a good time. You get to photograph them, you get to pet them, whatever you're doing, I won't judge. Um, and so they have time to get the pollen really stuck to them. But a beetle, it's sitting on the flower. You don't really need sticky pollen to get stuck to a beetle. It's just hanging out there for a very long time. Enough pollen will work its way all over its body. So they'll have a lot of pollen, but it doesn't necessarily need to be sticky. So here's an example of some nectar guides. I took this on an olive tree last night with a big UV flashlight. So you can see not only does that pollen really fluoresce. Now, of course, we're limited by this is a reflection of the UV light from a flashlight instead of it being daylight. So there's what we can see versus what an insect or a bird can see. We're limited by our human perspective. But even to us, you can see, wow, the pollen is just really illuminated. And for insects such as bees who actually want to consume the pollen, that's important. And the same with beetles. Some beetles want to consume the pollen. So it is important that the pollen stands out as well. And then you can see in the center, it has a ring of shiny reflective white. A little bit further in there, it's a bit more reflective but yellow. And then the outside, it's darker. And if you look at it in the daylight, you would see essentially the opposite. The inside would be very dark and the outside is that beautiful pearly white. Well, they don't see it quite that way because what the flower is focused on is, I don't care about how beautiful the petal is. I need to make sure that these insects know where my nectaries are and where my pollen is going to be. Okay, so here's a couple of examples of different flower types and their insect pollinators. So you can see there's a moth and a hoverfly, and this is a flower fly, not a carrion fly. And a carrion, I mean, a flower fly is going to visit much of the same flowers as you'll see other nectaring insects. So if you see a moth on it or a butterfly or a bee, you'll probably find a flower fly, which is your hoverflies, where if you look at it, or a bee mimic fly, and you're like, wow, that's a bee. And then it deceives you once you look at the photos on your camera. And so here you go, you got some shiny beetles, you got some bees, more bees, a wasp, a moth, more bees. So you can just see the range of different flowers that all these insects will enjoy. And then you have some examples of them doing what they really shouldn't based off of that chart. So you have two big eastern carpenter bees, which we don't have here in the valley. This was taken up near College Station. And there they are. It's called nectar robbing. So they're actually chewing holes in the flowers because they know their proboscis can't reach. And also they can't hover and drink the nectar the way it was intended. So these bigger bees that just see the flower, say, no, not today, and chew a hole in so they can reach the nectaries. So this doesn't pollinate the flowers, unfortunately, but if you're big enough and you're strong enough, you can get what you want anyways. And then there's some occasions where insects won't follow our human rules. So a red flower shouldn't attract bees. Bees can't see the color red, it looks black to them. And yet you see this beautiful little green sweat bead nectaring on the flower that technically they shouldn't be able to see. So that goes to show if I were to get a UV light and shine it on this flower, there's probably some sort of nectar guide that we can't see. So it's always important to be mindful of, okay, not everything's going to follow our rules 100% of the time because we're limited by our human senses. Okay, so bird and mammal pollinators. So I'm going to cover these ones a bit more briefly because, like I said, I don't know that much about birds, honestly. But I do know that hummingbirds and some of the other bigger birds have different needs when it comes to nectaring off of plants. So hummingbirds, of course, not only can they hover in place, but they have the very long, slender beaks, the ridiculously long tongues, and of course, they're so small that they can just sit on a lot more things versus your mockingbirds, warblers, orioles. These are a bit chunkier birds. They can't quite sit on a flower as much unless it's a giant flower. So they have slightly different needs. They do both primarily enjoy red and orange flowers. Birds are tetramats, so they actually have 4 cones, so they see a wider variety of colors. And I believe hummingbirds like a purer red, and then the other birds like a more orangey red, if I remember correctly. And they don't need nectar guides. They probably can see them, but they don't really utilize them. They both want giant, large flowers or long flowers, and especially some of the bigger birds like the orioles. They would prefer if they could perch on something. And then for the nectar availability, hummingbirds really need a more concentrated nectar. It needs to be full of sugars, full of those carbs because their metabolism is so high. But for other birds that just really like some of the sweet stuff, so some of your birds that would go after fruits and things like that, they don't need such a concentrated nectar. So a flower or a plant could produce a more dilute nectar that's less energy intensive for them to create, and it would still attract a bird pollinator to come in, do the job. And birds don't really smell, so they don't need nectar or flowers that have strong odors to it. And they don't, the plants don't need to produce as much pollen for them. But bats, on the other hand, they do need the smell of the flowers because that's between echolocation and smell. That is some of their main ways of finding food sources. So they will enjoy flowers that you can smell in the night from many feet away. You're like, whoa, what smells amazing? If you're in the desert, it's probably a cool giant cactus that you haven't seen yet. And they prefer plants that are very similar in the flower shape. So they want something big, something they can hover next to or even grab onto and perch on. they want a lot of nectar because they are a big animal, but because they consume so much of it, the flower tends to produce a little bit more dilute nectar. And they, of course, they don't have the nectar guides, and their flower colors are different. They're walking around. I mean, flying around at night. They don't need the flashy blue or the red. So white, greens, and maybe a purple flower is perfectly acceptable for them. And here is an example of some hummingbirds. So you can see the flower color. They don't really care quite as much, but that beautiful long tube is just perfect for them to sit, hover over, and drink the nectar. And the same thing with this one. So this flower is a bit more unique shaped, of course, right? It's not quite a tube, but it has nectaries that are perfect for them to be able to use, and it's the correct color to attract birds. And I found these images because I don't have any pictures of bats myself, but here's an example of some bat flowers and the Cheeto puff of a bat in that person's hand. They're very dense fur that's really, really good for getting pollen worked in all those nooks and crannies. And because they shove their head so far into the flower to be able to drink from the nectaries, is down there, and so they have all of this pollen and all of these anthers to get through. And so while the flower doesn't produce as much for a ratio, I mean, it produces a lot of pollen because it's a big flower, but if we're talking about ratios, it doesn't produce as much pollen as some other plants do. And you can see why they don't need to go too crazy. The bats hold onto their pollen very well. All right, so we're going to cover abiotic pollination. That's your wind. These flowers are usually not the typical flower shape. So, for example, if you think of corn, the corn silk that you see on the corn, that's part of the flower. So each one of those silks correspond with the kernels, and so when the pollen touches the silks, that's how the corn gets pollinated and produces their fruit. So you'll see on grasses, you'll see all their little silks, and so all it takes is a pollen to be swept on the breeze, and it gets into one of those silks, it produces their seed. So they don't need pollinators. Sometimes a pollinator will visit, but they produce no nectar. And the only bad part about this wind pollination is you have to create so much pollen that not only are your humans going to become allergic to you potentially. So if you have allergies, it's not flowers. It's not the big beautiful flowers that we're thinking of. It's your tree pollen, your grass pollen. If it's a wind pollinated plant and you're allergic to pollen, blame those guys. Don't blame the cool flowers that you see. It's not necessarily the sunflowers, it's the grass. And water plants, only 2% of flowers are pollinated from water. The pollen will actually sit on the surface of the water or maybe just below the surface. And water pollinated plants tend to be your invasive plants that you'll see here in the United States. I believe the hydrillas are water pollinated. And so they'll just drop their pollen into the water and it'll be carried downstream. And there's exceptions to every rule. So this might be an annoying grass, and yet you still have a hungry, hungry honeybee who's also an invasive, taking pollen from that grass. The pollen isn't very nutritious, but when it's January 1st and hardly anything else is blooming, you will find insects taking pollen off of plants that they really shouldn't even be bothering to look at. So, virtual field trip. We're gonna look at some flowers and try to guess what their pollinators will be. So we have a red tube. What kind of pollinators do you think are gonna come to this flower? Hummingbirds, right? Wrong. Carpenter bee. Hummingbirds is the correct answer. I don't have any of a hummingbird on this plant, but that is the correct answer. But remember, some of your large carpenter bees, I believe this is a Strand's carpenter bee, will come and they will steal the nectar and rob the nectar by chewing a hole in it. So just remember, your rules aren't set in stone. You will get bees on flowers that theoretically they can't even see. All right, this is another one. Hummingbirds again, right? And bees. So you still have different flower, but same color, same shape, same behavior, but also butterflies. So you have a nice, pretty butterfly sitting and nectaring. Well, actually, I don't think she's nectaring in that photo, but birds and bees, birds and butterflies will often visit similar flowers, and bees will steal from them. So, what do we think pollinates these flowers? Bees? Beetles. So, we have this cool beetle. I believe he's a longhorn beetle. I don't remember the genus for him, but he is pollinating and nectaring off of this flower. But also bees. You guys were correct. Absolutely. This is the most stereotypical bee flower. Anything in the sunflower family, Asteraceae, is going to be a bee flower. Just expect there to be a bee on it. But we also have a mosquito. So unfortunately, they do a little pollinating too. We don't have to like it. We just have to acknowledge it. All right. What do you guys think pollinates this one? Same thing, right? You got your bees, you got a fly, you got a wasp. And don't forget, wasps are pollinators. Anything that a bee will pollinate, a wasp will also pollinate. They're in the same order, Hymenopterans. They're cousins to each other. So you have I forget the type of fly that one is, so I'm sorry. So you have a fly and a wasp, and you have a bee. There was also butterflies on that one. And so here is a flower that theoretically shouldn't have bees. It's the Esperanza flowers, big tube flowers. Ideally, you would be seeing butterflies and hummingbirds on them. But this is a specialized bee who says, forget the rules. I'm going to be really tiny and just get in the flower instead. And then, of course, your stereotypical butterfly. Hummingbird, thank you. It flies. It's close enough, right? Okay, so what do you think pollinates this flower? It's a little greenish, a little yellowish. Moths, butterflies. That's a moth. That's a moth. It's it is a wasp moth. I forget the first name, but it is a type of moth, and it nectars off of this one. And then a butterfly, I believe it was a purple Florida. I don't know. Somebody said it was like a rare one, so I threw a picture up in there just in case any of you guys know which one this is. And then you have two different types of bees. You have a bigger, meaner bee, and then a small. The next photo that you guys don't see is that bee hit that other smaller bee and kicked it right off the flower. And so then both of the bees were blurry. So at least you got one non-blurry bee in this photo. They're very mean to each other. But this is a really good nectar source for pretty much all insects. Here's another one. What do you guys think pollinates this one? Hummingbird. The flower is about that big. I'm sorry. There is no scale to that. The bees, flies, butterflies. Yep. Yeah, because it's purple, right? So this one is, I call it small bee crack because small bees go absolutely bonkers for this plant. Blues and purples are a bee's favorite color. So if you see a blue or a purple flower, you know for sure that one is a bee plant. But also, yes, butterflies and moths, and I've seen very tiny beetles on this one. All right. How about this one? Everybody knows what this one's good for. Butterflies, yeah. Yeah, this is a favorite of butterflies. There we go. One beautiful little butterfly.
What is the plant?
The mist flower. I don't remember which mist flower though. Mist flower? Mist flower, yep. And then we also have some beetles who like to take advantage of the mist flower. with their high nectar. And then we have beautiful bees as well. Probably the same thing. You got your bees, your butterflies. This one is a fly. I don't remember the species, but we have some fly pollinators. We have a wasp and I believe a mosquito. And then we also had bees. All right, frog fruit. Butterflies, yeah, that's a good one for butterflies. There it is, tiny little guy. And then you also have hoverflies and bees. Oh, and a really cool wasp. I don't know what he is, but he's really cool. All right, so as you can see, if it's a flower and it exists out there, you'll probably get a butterfly on it. Butterflies are some of our most dynamic pollinators, but if it's small enough or crafty enough, you can't really go wrong with almost any flower. But how do we garden for them? So you definitely want to have a wide range of flower types and colors. If you have a large enough garden, you want a rainbow ideally. So just like humans need to eat food of different colors, if you want to attract the widest range of pollinators, you are going to plant the widest range of flower colors, shapes, and sizes. And not only about the flower shapes and sizes, but also the size and shape of the entire plant. Because what a bee and a fly can easily visit, a butterfly or a bird might not. So for example, if you have beautiful hummingbird flowers, but then you have a big bush of tiny flowered plants that have overgrown it, well, now your butterflies and your hummingbirds probably can't get to that nectar source because it's covered by a different, bigger plant that's really only ideal for maybe bees, flies, and other really small insects. And you also want to make sure that you have plants that flower at different times of the day as well. So we have plants that only really want to flower in the morning, some that prefer full sun, full heat, full bore, Texas, everything, some that will only flower at night. So because there's different pollinators that only come out in the morning, the day, the evening, and then pure darkness, you want to make sure that there's food available for every single one of those pollinators, even if you don't get to enjoy them because they're only morning or night creatures. And different flowers will bloom at different lengths as well. So for example, you have your big, beautiful wild olives. Once they flower, those flowers seem to stay there forever. But a cactus flower will only stay open for 24 hours. So if you're trying to attract insects and you only have flowers that are open for a day, well, I hope you have a bunch of those plants. So every day there's something blooming, or else maybe the flowers will all go off and then that's it. You won't have any more blooms for a couple of days or a couple of weeks. That doesn't help the pollinators. If they come to a source, maybe they start building nests and then that's it. You don't have any fall or evening flowering plants. And of course, if you want to have the pollinators stay and be healthy and not have to fly super long distances to come to your beautiful heavenly garden of and grocery store, you definitely want to make sure that there's going to be water and nesting resources for them. So for, of course, for bees, that means maybe little native bee hotels or a piece of twigs and logs that you keep out in the back of the garden, maybe hidden in a couple of bushes where they're not so ugly and standing out. And maybe a patch of dirt that you're just kind of let do its thing. You're not weeding it. You're not putting anything to till it or any pesticides over it. Because a lot of our, for example, our native bees are ground nesting bees. So no amount of little bee houses is going to give them a home. And even butterflies will need somewhere comfortable to roost at night. So if you don't have any big tall trees, well, maybe planting a tree, at least one tree in the corner of the house or the front yard will give those butterflies, especially migrating butterflies like our monarchs, some place to roost at night to stay protected and stay safe. And of course, reducing your pesticide usage. So if you're going for a native garden, to attract our native pollinators anyways, you might as well go maybe the next extra step and start reducing or completely eliminating your pesticide usage, because it's been proven that so many of these pesticides will build up in a plant and in the ground over time and then affect the ability for these insects, especially insects, to reproduce. And of course, if the insects are sick, then the birds that eat the insects are also going to get sick. So with that, thank you. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'd be happy to answer them. Yes, ma'am.
Just about how many bee species are native here?
How many bee species are native? Okay, so in the entire world, we have 20,000 bee species. In yeah, don't worry. I'll get to it. Yeah, bees are very diverse. So we only have, I'll make it really easy. We have one species of non-native bee, and depending on which entomologist you want to ask, we have anywhere between 1,000 and 800 native bee species in the valley. In the valley. And we have a lot of bee species, just like with butterflies and birds, that you won't see anywhere else in the United States, because we are at the very tippy top northern edge of their range. And then vice versa, our neighbors in Mexico, there's some that we get that's the most southern tippy point of their range that they won't get in even in northern Mexico.
And I corrected, am I hearing correctly? There are
1,000 to 800 species of native bees.
So when I go out and look at bees on my
Yeah.
It could be one of 1,000.
Yeah. It
I
is.
always thought that they're either like African killer bees or
Well, those quote African killer bees are honeybees, and those are our non-native bee.
Right.
So honestly, if you go out and look at any flowers, if we go for a little walk out here in the gardens of Steck and we observe all of the bee species that we can find, we tally them up, the honeybee section is going to outblow the native bee section, just because of the way their colonies work. 80% of all bees are solitary bees, 80 to 90, depending on how you classify solitary or not. And honeybees are the most social of all of bees. So one colony, one small colony like the ones we took out of Robert's house a couple of weeks ago, that was a tiny colony, between 10,000 and 20,000 individuals in that colony, versus the biggest bumblebee colony you might find here will have maybe 200 individuals. So, yes, go ahead. Yeah.
That question. Okay. Of our 1,800 native bees, I know that the carpenter bees sting.
They have a stinger, but they don't sting.
Yeah. Okay. So of those 1,800 natives, how many of those will sting people?
Every single bee, so every female organism in the order Hymenopterid, so that includes wasps, ants, and bees, if they are a female, they have a stinger. Now, it's based on behavior whether or not they'll use it. So, for example, if you go and you hold a feral honeybee, actually, it's a toss-up if she's just out there whether or not she stings you. But it's pretty hard to get a native bee to sting you unless you're holding it and it's trying to escape your hands. But if you're walking in nature, and even if you just brush up against, let's say, a leafcutter bee, because those ones are pretty easy to distinguish from other bees. If you go and you accidentally hit a leafcutter bee with your hand, she's going to be very, very forgiving. She's busy. She has other things to worry about. She's going to leave you alone. You weren't a threat to her. Now we go to our bumblebees, which I have personally removed, relocated, and annoyed. They are more likely to sting you, especially our one species of bumblebee that we have here in the valley is the American bumblebee, Bombus pennsylvanicus. And they are the most offensive of all the bumblebee species because we're very lucky and blessed like that. And so if you get close to their nest, and by close I mean within 2 feet of their nest, and you're not paying attention to the bee who's flying in front of your face telling you to go away, she's not going to hesitate to sting you. But that is because you are walking up to a nest. If you're standing back enjoying your garden and you are very, very lucky to have a bumblebee come to your garden, even if you go and you bounce her on the head on purpose, it's very unlikely that she's going to attack you. So you never have to worry about a native bee stinging you. The only ones you have to worry about are disturbing a colony of honeybees. So you never have to worry about a native bee just stinging you, unless you step on one. Then you'll probably get stung by it, but most people wear shoes.
This idea about the nectar robbers,
Mm-hmm.
do they think it's a relatively new thing that these bees have learned to do?
No, your thing at touchscreen. No, I don't believe it's very new. We've certainly observed it for a very long time. So far as we've been, oh, they're there. So long as we've been looking at animals and appreciating the things that they do, evolutionarily speaking, I don't believe it's very new. It's probably as soon as flowers developed the ability to hide their nectar from bees, I'm pretty sure there was a bee who taught other bees how to get in there. Yes.
Do the nectar robbers, like the carpenter bees,
Mm-hmm.
nonetheless serve as pollinators?
Yes, absolutely. They are going to steal this food, but there are plenty of other flowers that they will visit. For example, at my house, I have the Cecilpenias that they go bonkers for. It's like one of the only bees I have at my house. And they will spend all day pollinating that plant. And you will see her absolutely covered in pollen with her big old pollen pants on her legs. So yes, they are vital pollinators. They just are also more opportunistic than some other bees. Yes, they're so great. Yeah, they're so fantastic, and they are good pollinators. And if they drill holes into places that you don't want them to, put out sacrificial wood blocks somewhere. You can either pre-drill the holes or not. But I always tell people you should have at least a couple of old pieces of like mesquite out there, take the bark off, and use it as the bee sacrifice so they don't drill holes in your fence posts or in your house.
One thing that we've noticed is that so we'll get the bumblebees that come in,
Mm-hmm.
drill their little holes, I know they're cheating,
Yeah.
they fly off, and then there'll be a butterfly that comes
Yes.
back and finds that
Yeah.
hole.
Yeah, because it's also easier for even a butterfly who can nectar the correct way. It's so much easier for them to be able to land on that flower and rob the rest of the nectar out. And then once you do that, you'll get all the other smaller bees. So you'll get small sweat bees, beetles, flies, all the other smaller insects will utilize that hole that a carpenter bee did. Yeah. Teamwork. This particular species, this is an eastern carpenter bee. And if you look, for example, on INAT, their range really ends about San Antonio. But we have 3 species of large carpenter bees. 2 of them, they recently renamed her. She used to be called the Mexican carpenter bee. She's the really big one. I believe now she's Griswold's carpenter bee. And then Strand's carpenter bee. There's 2 that are solid black as females. The Griswold's carpenter bee is slightly larger, and then there's one. I have a picture of her here. There's one carpenter bee that is. There we go. Nope. There's one who has the stripes. That one. I don't remember what her name is, but she's big and black, but she has little half moon stripes along the sides of her abdomen. No, it's not Turk's cap. It's firebrush. Yeah. So.
Female bees a lot. What
I'm trying to temper the joke that I can make. What what are men good for? So they don't collect pollen because they're not rearing young. So all they do is they eat. So for bees, they eat and they create the babies. That's what they're good for. They're good for creating the new baby bees. They don't have stingers, so they can't even, defend anything, even if they wanted to. You know what they're great for? Being cute. You'll have a big old male carpenter bee, and I can tell he's a big old male because he has like a little yellow face instead. And they're really cute because you can grab them and they will try to sting you and they can't do anything. And that's really great for humans. But yes, they do provide some pollination to these flowers because they have to. This is excluding honeybees. So for native male bees, they will go out and they will nectar off of different plants, and they'll put pollen. They'll have a little bit of pollen transfer, but because female bees are actively scooping the pollen onto their bodies, and they have the specialized pollen scopal hairs, they can really carry a lot on purpose to different flowers. The males just kind of pollinate accidentally, if they do at all. Yeah. But yeah.
No, don't forget, all the mosquitoes that bite you are female.
Yeah, and all
I'm
of
just saying.
all of the bees that sting you are also female. Yep. It's really easy to remember that one for sure. Yeah. A stinger, and ants, when they quote bite you, they're actually stinging you. I mean, they might actually be biting you, but that's only to hold on to you to sting you. And with hymenopterans, their stinger is actually, of course, a hollow tube. It's a modified ovipositor. So that's their modified egg laying device. So if it can sting you, that means it has, or it did have an ovipositor, and they have that ability. And so because the women create and lay the eggs, the men have a different set of tools instead of an ovipositor or a stinger. So I'll let the imagination fill that one in of what a man might have instead.
So you said there were 1,800 different kinds of.
1,000 to 800.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
We'll use 1,000.
Yeah.
But, so when you talk about a honeybee, are there variants in that category as well? Are there many different kinds of honeybees as well?
Yeah, so now we're getting into my expertise. So yes, there are different types of honeybees. So if we look at the honeybee that we have here, her Latin name is Apis mellifera. If we want to go to the breed of honeybee, most of the honeybees here are going to be the Africanized honeybee. So her full name would be Apis mellifera scutitalia. And so if we're looking at just the species of Western honeybee, Apis mellifera, she has debatably 8 to like 28 different breeds. So that's like, okay, you have your dog, that's a canine, and then you have your golden retrievers and your golden doodles and your chihuahuas and stuff like that. They're all the same species, but different breeds. So if we expand a little bit back and we look at honeybees, the whole genus Apis, we have about 8 different species in that genus. So we have the Western honeybee, we have the Eastern honeybee, which is Apis cerana, the Himalayan honeybee, which is the ones that you see those crazy videos online of those people climbing inside caves, and it's just like the big comb, and you see all these giant bees attacking people, and you're like, how are those people even alive? I ask myself that anyways. That's the giant Himalayan honeybee that creates the hallucinogenic honey. Then we also have, that's Apis dorsata. Then we also have like the red dwarf honeybee, the black dwarf honeybee. There's quite a few different honeybees.
So what they call them are they?
So when you breed in between species, even with even with mammals, there's like incompatibility sometimes. So for example, you breed a horse and a donkey, you get a mule, and then like a zebra and a donkey, and you get like a zool and stuff like that. And then those creatures are infertile, right? So you can't really breed a western and an eastern honeybee. I believe insects are more sensitive to being able to breed outside of their species than mammals are. So there's not really any hybridization between them, but there is subspeciation. So the different races or breeds of the bees can definitely intermix, which is why we have Africanized or African derived honeybees, because in Apis mellifera, we have the African honeybee, we have the Italian honeybee, the Russian honeybee, the Caucasus honeybee, the Cape honeybee, the Iberian honeybee, the buckfast honeybee. We have all these different races or breeds of honeybees, just like we do have literally hundreds of different breeds of dogs and cats. So those guys can interbreed, but not the different
So I
species.
guess what I'm asking, so when you have a honeycomb, for example, that's
Mhm.
created by a colony.
Yeah.
Usually that colony will.
Yeah, it'll be pure Apis mellifera, and that's all it will be. Mhm. And then if you're dealing with bees in the United States, all you have is Apis mellifera, because honeybees, the whole genus of Apis, is not native to North or South America. They're an old world insect, so everybody but North, South America, and Antarctica has a species of honeybee. So we only have Apis mellifera. Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions? If not, Devin, thank you.
Thank you.
There's a really nice graphic that I like to send when the opportunity is right, and I forgot to put it up here. It's a graphic that shows let's say a double, what do you call it? When you get a flower that double it flowers, what do you call it? I was thinking of a less technical term, but there's these cultivars and these hybrids. There's these beautiful, complicated flowers. Imagine that very simple hibiscus, but this one's double and triple and all that kind of stuff. And the graphic that I like to show is a native bee coming up to that flower saying, "What the heck is that?" Because it does not have these patterns, so it doesn't even know where to go in to look for nectar, and that cultivated plant may not even produce the pollen that they need. It can be a special breed that is not going to create a seed or anything else. And so when we talk about natives, we do like to sort of stress that, yes, you may have that great, beautiful plant. My mom loved hibiscus, so I may have one there with this big, beautiful plant that is from somewhere in central Mexico. But our native bees and native pollinators are going to look at that and not necessarily know what to do with it. So if you can dedicate 80% of your yard to natives, then we know our pollinators are going to have something that is good for them. There is one native hibiscus, relatively small, beautiful red flower, but all the other exotic ones that you see, the much bigger, which one?
I think the one that has the green sweat beads on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Right
Oh, that one. Oh, did I pass it?
Yep.
That one. And it looks huge, but it's a relatively small flower. It's about that.
Yeah, it's not that little.
Yeah. It's not. It's that little. Well,
The larger ones, as long as they're simple, are okay for the bees too, right? Because the stem is visible, right?
unfortunately, some of the things that we'll find is that it may get used. The best way is to go out there and see if you see something that's using it. Some evidence that it's actually playing a role, and some of them may, but you'll get, let's say, one or two different pollinators that come to it because they're like, oh, I don't know who you are, but I think you have nectar there. Yeah, and then compare that to one of these, and our natives, you'll get 10 times more pollinators coming to it because it's recognized, they know what it is, they know what to do. They have all the right markers, like Devin was saying, versus some of these that have been cultivated that we don't necessarily see with the insect eyes. So we see a beautiful red, big hibiscus flower, but what do the insects see? The insects might not recognize it, or certainly not in our region compared to, let's say, if you had it in its native habitat. Devin showed a picture of the bougainvillea, for example, and I think it's from Australia. It's another non-native, but yet you certainly see it in the valley ever since, you know.
Because if they're not propagating in your yard, then chances are they're not.
Yeah, if you have that one single bush, that one single plant that never seems to produce more kids, then that's also one, like you said, that there is no pollination happening that, or you could be unlucky and have that one male plant that doesn't have any females around for you to see those little kids. So there's all these little things to think about. Yeah.
I'm not very knowledgeable about plants, I'm afraid. And I just live in a residential area with a lawn, and especially and it's not mandatory, just mow it. But in my backyard is actually at least half weeds. And what I'm wondering is, all those little weed flowers that pop up, little purple things and this and that, like, how likely are they to be native plants?
If you simply stop mowing and let nature show you what's there, chances are really good that they're going to be native. They're probably seeds that have been dropped there by visiting birds. If you have a tree or a fence line, chances are a bird landed there and dropped something for you. There's always a possibility that what you have is native. You won't know as long as you keep mowing it every other week, for sure. Like, so in our yard, what we did is we simply stopped mowing, and I started adding flags to everything that I saw coming up, and I would turn to her and say, is this a keeper? And we'd look up in our book and talk to people, and they would say, yeah, that's a native this or that. And that's how we started to learn our plants, as well as these are the non-natives. So in our backyard near the Resaca, we had this big, beautiful flowering plant that produced these beautiful red berries, and we thought this was fantastic. We got insects coming to it. We have butterflies, birds, everything, only to find out that it's a Brazilian pepper. And it's not native. It's a water sucker. It loves water. You see it along a lot of the Resaca beds. And I've been fighting that one tree for 10 years to try to get rid of it. It won't die. But it's a non-native that outcompetes our native plants, and so it becomes a huge problem. Yeah. Given a chance, it'll move in, just like guinea grass will. And that's the other challenge with not mowing, is that at some point in time, you have to, simply because the non-natives, they're going to.
Johnson grass, I suppose.
Right.
It's not native.
Correct. And so some of those end up growing so much faster than my small little frog fruit, that at some point I need to go in there and give the frog fruit a chance to kind of compete. And with this rain, love the rain, but guinea grass loves it too.
I suppose it's better when you mow to mow it as high as you can.
That's exactly what I like to tell people. And I'm at a point now that I wish I could put bigger wheels on my mower so I can even mow higher, because even my frog fruit is starting to go up, and my mower is going to cut the flowers off. And so there's always that chance that I have to find another way to mow because I want to keep my frog fruit, but these other taller grasses are cheating. So, but yeah, go in there with just scissors and cut them off, give it a haircut. But if you do mow with your mower as high as possible, that gives you a chance to see something new coming up in the grass. And that's how we went from 5 or 6 native species in our yard to over 200, simply by mowing high, mowing less often, and flagging everything. I haven't used my zero-turn mower in about a year and a half. Instead, it's all push. But that's the only way I'm going to save that little plant that I see there. And sometimes it's that little bug that's on that flower that tells me, oh, that's something interesting. I'm going to flag it and leave it alone and see what happens.
In order to identify Brazilian peppers, so they can pull it out on small and they're easy to get rid of.
Yeah.
Because once it's developed, it is very difficult.
And it'll come up from the roots, it'll come up from the stump that you left, and you're fighting it for a long, long time.
Yeah, I've learned that in terms of these types of plants, brush is the most amazing pollinator plant I've ever seen. It's white brush. And it is outside of my kitchen window, and it blooms however often. And the amount of pollinators that I see on that plant, it is hard to comprehend. There must be, 30 different types in a given day that I'm just, like, I've never seen that before, I've never seen that, I've never seen that. And it shows just the breadth of the amount of species of pollinators that we have. What does it look like?
I don't think
It's hard to describe. It has long branches, and at the very ends of the branches are little flowers that are, very small and white, and it has a really strong and beautiful smell, like.
Looks like monkey grass?
No.
it'll be a nice big bush. Yeah.
And you got it like
I got it from Mikey.
Mikey.
Somebody.
No,
Not.
Yeah.
Flowers are like, like, usually, we got the triangle.
With pollinators.
Oh, she's gonna show us.
Thank you.
Oh,
Big bucks for.
oh, yeah. One quick thing about anything that you see the pollinators on during the day, challenge yourself to go out at night and see what you see. Because you'll see the nighttime moths, you'll see the nighttime animals come out there. And sometimes you'll find that's when the roaches come out and play a role in getting that nectar and stuff. Oh, one thing about, like the white brush and everything else that you can buy, a lot of these plants we will get from a native plant nursery like a Mike Keep, like Oleander Acres up in Mission. A lot of the times what you find in a box store, the Home Depots, the Lowe's, try to stay away from anything that is in quotes that says it's a hibiscus the quotes tell you it's a cultivar, it's been bred to be that plant, which raises a big question as to how good of a player it is to our ecosystem. Yeah.
But they're not native, and in fact, I don't even think they attract any
Right.
pollinators at all.
And we have 3 or 4 native lantanas, but at a box store, you'll find a bunch of them and think, oh, they're all lantanas. That's great. Let me take one. When it comes down to it, if you can quickly Google the genus species that's on the label, and there are a lot of sources that will tell you whether that's a native plant or not. But even if it's a native plant, what growers will grow, and in most cases, most growers use some sort of pesticide, use some sort of chemical, and by law, some of the times they have to, but then they sort of sequester them. But then there's some plants that they will treat them with the pesticide in the plant to prevent insects from attacking it. Because most people want that beautiful plant planted today, flowering, looking great, and I don't want to see any kind of insect nibbling in it at all. And so what growers will do is already have that pesticide in there to keep them from doing that. If an insect does get in there and an insect can find it tasteful enough to get the nectar, it'll carry that poison with it. And now you have another bird, something that's going to eat that insect, and that continues on. It's the same thing with, we can't stand mosquitoes. All the female mosquitoes are out there biting you. They're female. And we can't stand it, and we know that they carry diseases and so forth, but when your city's out there spraying for mosquitoes, that poison's going on to kill any insect that's there. And it'll land on your flowers so that it doesn't kill anything, but that butterfly that lands on that leaf of that plant now has it on their feet, which is what they use to taste. So now that butterfly has it in the system. This bird comes in and eats that butterfly. Now that bird has it and feeds it to their chicks and so on and so on. So it's an unfortunate vicious cycle that we get into, and that's just unfortunate.
I've never seen one like that in any of the places that I like last year.
And a lot of the times it's because it's a small flower, and most people want something big that they can show. And most of our natives don't like that extra care and attention that we think we have to water it all the time, give it fertilizer all the time. We did that and learned that we can kill this guy really easily just by being too caring. We give it the best soil, we put it in the right spot, and it dies. But then you go to a place like Hugh Ramsey Nature Park in Harlingen, and it's growing, and nobody's taking care of it, and it's blooming, and and we can't do it at home. So now I'm putting plants, and I'm just ignoring them. I don't talk to them or anything, and hope that they like it.
They also don't get very tall.
Yeah.
So they're good for they're a short-lived perennial, so they only live about 3 to 5 years. But they'll readily volunteer, so you can steady supply of them to individual plants.
So if you have it in a nice spot that it likes, it'll bloom, it'll flower, it'll reseed itself and keep coming back like they do at Hugh Ramsey. Huh?
Or they may not come back right where they are, but
They will kind of
they'll
move.
find where they're happy.
One thing about not mowing is that you'll begin to see plants grow where they like it. Not where I want it to be, but where it wants to be. And I'm like, okay, yeah, it's like, okay, if that's what you like, I will mow around you and make a garden out of that one place that you want to be at. And that tends to work.
The other thing that we learned, I guess, in class was that native plants have a life cycle, and we always like to have, so it starts to die and you start watering it more and more. It's not going to come back,
Yeah.
but it'll come back when it's time.
A lot of things that you'll see is people watering early in the morning during the summertime because it's of course hot and dry. And they keep watering that poor tree that is dropping its leaves because that tree knows it's summertime. It's hot. I cannot stand the heat. No matter how much water you give me, I don't need it. And then you overwater, you create root rot, you end up killing the tree, and oh man, I couldn't keep that alive. And it's just something different than what we're normally told to do. Because you water that exotic that needs all that water, kind of like St. Augustine. You water, 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 mow, 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 fertilizer, water, mow, mow, mow. It's a vicious cycle.
I just want to put in a good word for lizards and spiders. I really enjoy watching spiders. When I see a bunch of insects around the Toronto Turk's cat, then at night I come out with my flashlight.
Yeah.
But I mean, really, and lizards too. I mean, if the brown owl is non-native, but from what I've read, it really don't know whether it's, displacing the green one or not. It's kind of, well, the brown one is kind of lower level and the green one is more upper level. The last I read, I haven't read about it for a while, but, we finally started, using insecticide in our house. It just took us forever. We've lived here 40 years, like we've only done it about 15 years because, cockroaches are rampant. And I need to tell the guy, I think, just not to do anything outside. Like he comes out, like I wonder if I should tell him, right? He does the inside, and then I tell him, don't go out in the yard. I like the spiders. But he does a little bit at the very outside. What do you know what I mean? Like the walls. What do you think about that? Should I just tell him, don't go outside?
One of our worst experiences was the guys that came in to do pesticide at our house before we knew better. And they almost instinctively went out to spray the harvester ants. And we're like, no, forget it. You guys can leave. Because they basically have that mindset that if it's an insect, a bug, or anything else, I got to kill it. And so,
inside my walls, and I do appreciate not having the cockroaches, but should I tell them don't even spray the outside wall?
That threshold, no matter how well you try to seal that door, there's some critter that can crawl through. We're ushering out spiders into our backyard that moved into the house. We're ushering out, any little insect. It's the worst experience that we had was we put some of that insect tape that the little critters walk on, get stuck, and they die. Have a poor little garden snake do that, and you can't save them, and you'll never use that stuff again. And so at that point, I'm like, no. And it's such a sad thing that they're just doing what they do, and they were trying to get into the garage, and now I'm like, you know what, insects, you can have my garage. I don't care. I am worried when we see a coral snake in our driveway, thinking, oh, okay, I don't really want you. And so yeah, we kind of shoo him away from a safe distance, and he goes off into the bushes and stuff. We also had a huge problem, and we still do, with bird strikes hitting our glass, our windows. So I stopped cleaning windows. I just don't do that anymore.
We stopped cleaning.
We stopped cleaning
it.
anyway.
That's what he said to make you feel better.
Yeah.
Come on.
So yeah. So in our patio now, so we don't spray. We don't even spray the threshold. Um, we get that occasional roach. I throw them outside to let the bats and everything else eat them. We will have the good thing about it is that we will have the garden snakes. We will have the uh, what's the black snake? The indigos come in our yard. Even though I know I have mice in our area, I'm like, you know what? If I leave you there long enough, an indigo is going to come get you, and sure enough, it will. Or an owl will, because I hear them at night. So a lot of times I just sort of tolerate them, unless they're honeybees moving into our house. So I tolerate them just because I know nature will take care of it. We have spiders that have built little webs all around our patio, which may not look great, but then you get the little birds coming in to hunt them down. And I'm like, okay, they'll keep the balance. They know where they can come in and get insects, and then they're picking them up. Oh, absolutely, it's okay. We're Halloween year round and stuff. So we get spiders on our Christmas tree because we haven't taken it down either, but that's a separate story. No. Between our dogs and our new cat, I'll never put up a Christmas tree again because they just play with it and stuff. So, now one thing about our chapter that we want to do is not only have this presentation for something that we can learn, but also have it as a community that we can talk about stuff like that. Little ideas that we can learn from each other, little things that, oh, I didn't know that. Because I think that's how little by little we get to learn stuff. The plant classes that are coming up, the very first one's introduction. For every class, we cover 45 native plants and 5 invasive. And so for these 4 classes, we had to come up with 200 plants. And I thought, that's a heck of a lot of plants. And they all have to be unique. Now, having gotten the list of these initial plants, I'm now at a point that I'm having to leave plants out of the list because I think I find something new that I think is so cool, but we're not going to be able to cover it in that amount of time that we have allocated. There are so many cool plants, so many things that they do, so many important roles that they play in our ecosystem that truly the Rio Grande Valley is really special, really unique. And there's other parts of Texas, other parts of the country where the invasives have basically taken over and they're having to fight it back. And so we get a really unique place to live in. Part of what I want us as a chapter to do is sort of showcase all these plants that we have to convince people to grow them in their yard. Or else we've become this monoculture, nothing but St. Augustine and oaks and stuff like that. You know, one of our best trees that if you have room for a tree is plant a ebony, the Texas ebony. It provides 10 times more of a habitat for insects than any other tree in the valley. And if you have one, and if you're in Cameron County, you probably noticed that it completely lost all its leaves. And that's thanks to that little inchworm invasion that we had. And so every tree, wherever you drove in Cameron County almost, looked like they were dead. Drive by there today and they're all a brand new lime green because they're all growing back. And there were posts on Facebook talking about, well, what do I have to spray to kill these things? Like, nothing. Let them do what they do. And there's a really interesting beetle that is a caterpillar hunter. Never heard of it before, but we had them crawling all over our driveway after those little caterpillars. And I thought that kind of scary to think but that's nature. But they all became food for these other little insects that will become food for something else later on. But it's an interesting, amazing cycle that our plants go through, and it's very unique here than anywhere else. We just need to go out there and reach to the public to say, that's normal, and that's okay. To have a tree that looks kind of dead in your yard, be proud of that because you just fed the ecosystem, and don't worry, our trees will come back. And they definitely do. Our house butts up to the National Wildlife Refuge, and every ebony there was dead. At least that's what it looked like. Because everything was bare of any leaf. And anybody driving through there would have said, oh, that's a hazard. The next windstorm's going to knock them down, blah, blah, blah. Wait 2 weeks and everything is a beautiful lime green. And that's just okay. That's just the way it is. So that's some of the stuff that we're trying to share with our chapter and our classes and so forth. Yeah.
I have two examples of plants that lost all their leaves and they looked like they were dead. But I just left them alone and just wanted to wait and see what happened. One was Berlin-Deer's wolfberry and the other was Crescio. So you came back. I don't know why.
We had a Crescio planted in the corner of our yard, in our front yard, and I totally forgot it was there. And during the worst of the summer, every other week, I'll go out and give them a little bit of water just to make sure they're hanging on. They're not too overly stressed, because some of them were young plants. I totally forgot that plant. And by the time I noticed it, it was just a stick. I'm like, so my mom always told me, leave those sticks alone, because you never know. And sure enough, with this last series of rains, that thing is just covered in leaves. And it is just incredible. But that's what our natives do. And unfortunately, our mindset is that you cannot have a yard full of dead looking sticks. That's not normal. Everything's supposed to be green and flowering and blooming. But all of our plants have learned to live in our summer and our winter using all these defenses, the thorns, the tiny little leaves, the small little flowers. They all survive and they do fine. It's us that are having to fight ourselves to say, no, I want it green. I want a big, huge flower. It's a mindset that takes a long time to deprogram, basically. And that's unfortunate for us. But that is one of our missions and one of our purposes to do. I want to touch base a little bit, if you guys don't mind. I want to share a little bit about the plant center and what we want to do. Oh, there's the mouse. If you've been out to the plant center out on the island, we have roughly about 1 acre that has been dormant for 4 or 5 years. We get a chance now with the county to bring it back. And this gives you an idea of what we're aiming for. And so the visitor center is there, of course, and we do have native plants that are there that are blooming now, but we want to change the background in order to display the 5 native plant habitats of the Laguna Madre area. And this is sort of the general outline to give you a vision of what this might look like. So we are talking about bringing in different soil, sand for the sand dunes and so forth, but these are all the native habitats. The front area would be essentially a butterfly garden, big attraction for the folks to drive by to see it. And then in the back, we'll have the native gardens, along with the greenhouse and covered planting areas for us to be able to propagate them. Not only do we want to show people the plants, but we want to direct them to people like Mike Heath to go get them, but also what do we have? Part of our mission as well is then to take these natives and take them out to any Cameron County facility, whether it's a park, a building, or anything else, to have native plants there. They have gone through the same challenge that almost everybody else does, that you buy an exotic and of course it dies after a freeze, dies over the summer, require too much maintenance and so on and so on. So they want our help to be able to fix that. And so this is the vision of what we will do with that acre. This is thanks to Ethel. Not only did she think of this concept, and at the time, 5 or 6 years ago, of that 1 acre, there was a little sliver that was supposed to represent these 5 different plant communities. Now we're basically looking at the 3/4 of that 1 acre will be these gardens. And I think that is what's really needed in order to have it really stand out and look good. But thanks to Ethel, she already had this, did all the research, talking with the Mike Keeps, looking it up anywhere she could to be able to identify what plants belong in each of those communities. So this goes through that entire list of the different areas that are out there and what she envisioned would be. And one of the neat things that we had Mike Keep go out there and visit the site, and we found a bunch of natives there, which is fantastic. So what we'll end up doing is potting a bunch of these plants, saving them until we kind of remodel the back area, and then put them back. But it's great to see that the plants are already there. And this is, we're this close to getting funding from the county to help us put this into place. We are responsible for maintaining the entire place, for operating. That means the finances have to come from us. But they want us to really develop this right away and make it sustaining much sooner. And so hopefully by next Tuesday, we'll know one way or the other that they have approved the funding for us to be able to get started on that. And that's really great news. In the meantime, we're out there, we're maintaining it, we're cleaning it. The inside structure has been, like I mentioned, we've been sort of redesigning what the interior looks like because we want to have at least enough space to hold a meeting like this. Because no matter what, sometimes meeting outside is just too hot. So we know we want space inside, and so we're doing all of that. If you can imagine this garden, we want the signage. We want to be able to bring and offer it to schools as a tour place that they can actually come out there and visit the garden and see what it is, see what our ecosystem is all about, how special it is. So we want that to be a place for folks to come, but then this will be our center location for us to do outreach going out as well. So the training classes that we have, we're purposely making sure that we offer it up in Mission, in Weslaco, and anywhere else that we can go out there and share that with the community. We're purposely making sure that we do each level in Spanish as well, since this is such a huge priority for our environment as well, for our community. So we'll try to tackle that as well. If you're interested and you have a passion for these plants, you can be an instructor for any of the levels. All you have to do is take the class, pass the exam, and you're in. But we'll also need people with the logistics at the time of the event that, you know what, I don't want to stand in front of people and do stuff like that, but I'm willing to help. Certainly let us know. Each of the plant classes will have a plant walk associated with it. So that, for example, if we had it here, this gives us a perfect place to go out there and view the site. One of our challenges is that we're covering plants that are native to the 4-county region. So that if we have a class on the island, I'm not going to be able to show you the plants that are from Hidalgo County, because they're just not going to grow there. But that's part of the education part too, is that what we see out here in the coast is very different. And we are fortunate that at some few places like you, Ramsey, you might find a plant that grows in Stark County simply because the soil there matches it and it'll grow. And that's the other component to it. So when we get to the design, we'll show you the tools and the places that you can go to determine what did my soil, my yard look like before humans came in and changed it. And there's a lot of tools out there that will give you the roadmap is how do I put it back? What plants do I need to introduce? And there are some places that it will tell you, you know what, this was developed as a strip mall at one point in time. This was used for hay for 20, 30 years. Expect it to take 30, 40 years to get it all back. It's talking about the time and the cycle of our plants. You plant these gardens and it takes years for them to get back to what it used to be. And chances are really good. There's a great saying that when's the best time to plant a tree? 20, 30 years ago. When's the second best time? Today. So much of what we will do, we will plant for the next generation to enjoy. And that's just unfortunately the truth. And that's what we need to do. Any questions about this? About our chapter, about our plans, our goals, anything that we're trying to do?
Is this on the web?
This is not on the website. I'm trying to come up with a format that I can put it up there easily. So in Facebook, for example, it'll accept images and pictures well, but not PDFs. So on the website, I need to create a page that I can post a PDF to that will show up. So we'll put that out there soon. If there are no questions, we'll end the meeting there. Oh, yes.
This person that you keep talking about, Mike,
Heap.
can you tell me where, or what's the name?
Heap, Heep. He runs a really great nursery. Essentially, his whole backyard is his nursery in Harlingen. I don't have it.
You have to call him to make sure he's there.
Yes. So the best chance is to make sure that he's available and he's free. If you give him a call, check to see, hey, I'm thinking of coming by this afternoon, and he'll tell you, oh, I'm.
Google him to find the information.
Yes. So Mike Heap Nursery.
Yeah, if you Google.
Yeah, he's got it. Yeah.
Okay, great.
If you ever happen to find yourself out in the Mission area, visit the butterfly gardens at Oleander Acres. Not only does he have his nursery, but then you can also see some of the plants in the back. What do they look like when they grow up and so forth.
And Oleander Acres are selling natives now.
Yeah. Anything else from anyone? Good. All right, we'll end it there. Thank you, guys.
I think Jim's James is on there.
Oh.
Or at least.
Same, I didn't even know, I didn't even know.